What if you awoke tomorrow to find yourself in a world dominated by beings 3 times your size? A world where you're no longer the apex predator, but a scurrying insect in the face of colossal power. Imagine stepping outside your door and encountering footprints the size of swimming pools, each a stark reminder of your insignificance. Picture straining your neck to gaze upon towering figures whose shadows blot out the sun, turning day into twilight. Their voices would rumble through the earth like a never-ending earthquake, and their very presence would fill you with a primal, bone-chilling terror, the kind that whispers of extinction. This isn't the premise of some outlandish science fiction novel. This, according to whispers echoing from ancient texts across the globe, is a glimpse into our history. Once, they say, there was an age when giants walked the earth, their footsteps shaping the very continents. The Nephilim, spoken of in hushed tones in Hebrew scripture. The Titans, immortalized in the epic poems of Greek mythology. The Fomorians, shrouded in the mists of Celtic lore. But these weren't the benevolent giants of childhood fairy tales, the gentle souls who befriend lonely children. These were predators, apex hunters with an insatiable hunger. And you wouldn't be a hero or a curious traveler. You would be prey, a vulnerable creature in a world designed for your demise. So, tell me, why would you survive the age of giants? We'll delve into this terrifying possibility together in this new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. Imagine, if you will, waking up in the age of giants. Your eyes flutter open, but immediately something feels profoundly wrong. The ground beneath you pulses with a rhythmic tremor. Like the beating of a gargantuan heart, you sit up, disoriented and groggy, only to realize that these aren't heartbeats. They're the earth-shaking footfalls of something unimaginably large. You stumble towards what you believe is your window, but as you peer outside, a wave of primal terror washes over you. The familiar landscape has been irrevocably transformed. Every tree looks like a mere twig, easily snapped and discarded. Every hill seems flattened, insignificant, and in the distance, moving with a slow, deliberate purpose towards your settlement, are shadows that stretch across the horizon like living, breathing mountains. The Hebrew Bible calls them Nephilim. Genesis 6-4 describes them with chilling clarity. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went in to the daughters of humans, who bore children to them. These were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown. But as you watch these titanic figures approach, their silhouettes growing larger with each agonizing moment, one truth becomes crystal clear. These weren't heroes. They are not saviors. They were your executioners, the bringers of your doom. According to the Book of Enoch, an ancient text predating even the Bible itself, these giants weren't simply oversized humans. They were abominations, grotesque parodies of life. Hybrid creatures born from the unholy union of fallen angels and human women, their very existence a violation of the natural order. The text describes them as being 3,000 ells in height. That's an utterly incomprehensible 9,000 feet tall. Now, as one of these creatures draws inexorably nearer to your settlement, you begin to grasp the true horror of those measurements. You crane your neck upwards, a futile gesture, but you can't even see where this monstrous being ends. Its foot, now visible in the distance, is larger than your entire village, dwarfing even the largest buildings. When it takes a single step, the ground bucks and heaves with such violence that you're thrown to your knees, the force ripping the breath from your lungs. You try to run, to escape this impending annihilation, but where can you possibly go? In a world built by and for giants, there is nowhere a creature of your size can truly hide. No sanctuary, no refuge. These giants weren't content to merely coexist with humanity. According to ancient sources, they were insatiable consumers, driven by an unending hunger. The Book of Enoch chillingly states that they consumed all the acquisitions of men. When even that wasn't enough to satisfy their monstrous appetites, they began to devour humans themselves, turning their once equals into mere livestock. As you crouch behind what used to be your home's wall, now reduced to rubble by the giant's relentless approach, you watch in abject horror as massive fingers, each thicker than the trunks of ancient trees, begin plucking people from the ruins. Your neighbors, your friends, your family, lifted effortlessly into the air, examined with a cold, detached curiosity, like insects under a microscope, before disappearing into a mouth so vast that you could walk into it standing upright. This is your new reality. This is the terrifying truth of the Age of Giants. You are not just small, you are food. Let's say against all odds that you somehow survive that first encounter. Perhaps the giant was distracted by easier prey, its attention fleeting. Maybe you stumbled upon a crack in the earth deep enough to conceal you from its gaze. Now you face an even more terrifying prospect. How do you navigate? How do you times live day to day in a world that was never meant for you? You need food to survive, but the crops that once nourished your village are now trampled into the earth, pulverized into a muddy paste by footsteps larger than houses. The few grains that remain are scattered across miles of devastated landscape, and gathering them would mean exposing yourself in the open for hours, hours when another giant might appear on the horizon, bringing with it certain death. You desperately need shelter, but look around you. Every structure in this world is built to accommodate beings whose scale you can barely comprehend. The doorways tower above you like cathedral entrances, impossibly high even if you could somehow manage to reach them. The stairs are carved from single blocks of stone, each step taller than you are, an insurmountable obstacle. Across the globe, we find massive stone structures that mainstream archaeology struggles to explain, puzzles that defy conventional understanding. The trilithons at Stonehenge, their purpose shrouded in mystery. The foundation stones at Baalbek, some weighing over 800 tons, their transportation seemingly impossible. The precision-cut blocks at Pumapunku in Bolivia, fitted together with such flawless accuracy that you can't slide even the thinnest knife blade between them. Modern engineers admit, with a mixture of awe and frustration, that they couldn't build these structures today, even with our most advanced machinery. But now, facing this reality, you begin to understand why they exist. They were built by and for beings who could handle 800-ton stones as easily as you handle a simple coffee cup. You need water to quench your thirst, to stave off dehydration, but the wells and fountains of this giant world are so deep and wide that approaching them is like standing at the edge of a sheer cliff. The containers used to draw water are larger than bathtubs and weigh more than cars. Even if you could somehow reach the precious water, how would you lift a bucket designed for hands the size of your entire body? In Lebanon, the ancient site of Baalbek holds a silent testament to this lost age, containing the largest worked stone blocks in the world. The Temple of Jupiter sits upon a foundation of stones, each weighing an almost unbelievable 800 tons. But even more enigmatic are the unfinished stones in the nearby quarry, blocks weighing up to a staggering 1,200 tons, cut with a precision that defies any rational explanation. As you wander through these ghost cities, built by hands impossibly large, every tool you encounter is equally out of reach. Hammers that weigh as much as cars, too heavy to even budge. Cups that could serve as swimming pools, far too large to drink from. Weapons that you couldn't even begin to wield, let alone lift. You're not just small in this world. You're utterly helpless, completely and utterly dependent on the whims of beings who see you as nothing more than insects. And that's when you realize the horrifying truth that has been lurking at the edge of your awareness. You weren't meant to survive here. You were meant to serve, to be a slave labor force. Or, more likely, to be consumed, to be nothing more than a fleeting meal. But let's say, against all reason, that you've managed to find food, water, and some form of shelter in the hidden crevices of this giant world, carving out a meager existence. Now comes the truly terrifying part, dealing with the rulers themselves, coming face to face with your oppressors. The Book of Jubilees, another ancient text, states that injustice increased on the earth and all flesh corrupted its way during the time of the giants. They weren't just physically superior, towering above humanity. They were morally bankrupt, devoid of empathy or compassion. And you, tiny and defenseless, would be completely and utterly at their mercy, subject to their cruelest whims. Picture your typical morning routine in this nightmare world. You wake up. If you manage to actually sleep through the constant rumbling of giant footsteps and immediately check the horizon for those telltale massive silhouettes, the harbingers of your doom. But then you hear it, a sound that sends a jolt of pure fear through your veins, a sound like thunder, but rhythmic, almost musical. Laughter. Giant laughter echoing across the desolate landscape like the malevolent voice of a forgotten god. And it's getting closer, resonating through your very bones. According to the scriptures, these beings filled the earth with violence. The Hebrew word used to describe their behavior, Hamas, carries a weight of meaning far beyond simple aggression. It means violence in its most extreme form, not just killing, but cruelty, oppression, and the complete absence of justice, a world where right and wrong have no meaning. As the laughter grows louder, closer, you realize with horror what's happening. They're playing a game, a twisted and cruel game of cat and mouse, and you're the game piece, the unsuspecting prey. You run, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, but your tiny legs can only carry you so far. The ground shakes with each massive footstep behind you, each one covering more distance than you could run in minutes, relentlessly closing the gap. You dive behind a boulder, a futile attempt at concealment, just as a shadow falls over you, a shadow cast by a being so tall that you can't even see its head, its true scale incomprehensible. A voice booms above you, a voice that sounds like landslides and thunder, a language that grates on your very soul. You don't understand the words, the guttural pronouncements, but the tone is unmistakable, amusement tinged with a hint of sadistic glee. To this creature, your desperate flight is entertainment, a pathetic performance. A massive hand reaches down, a hand larger than your entire hiding place, blotting out the sun. Fingers thicker than tree trunks probe the area around your rock, toying with you, letting you think, for a fleeting moment, that you might actually escape, before deliberately cutting off your only route of retreat. This isn't hunting, a necessary act of survival. This is play, pure and simple, and you're the toy, the disposable object of their twisted amusement. This is what daily life would be like under giant rule. Not a noble struggle for survival, but a prolonged form of entertainment for beings who see you as nothing more than an amusing pest, a source of fleeting amusement before your inevitable demise. The ancient texts suggest that these giants weren't just randomly violent, acting on impulse. They were systematically evil, corrupting everything they touched. They taught humans forbidden knowledge, the arts of war, the making of weapons, the secrets of sorcery and seduction. But they did this not to help humanity advance, not to enlighten them, but to corrupt and ultimately destroy them, to turn them against themselves. Let's say you encounter a friendly giant, an anomaly, one who doesn't immediately try to crush or eat you. Instead, it kneels down to your level, which still puts its face high above you like a towering building, and begins to teach you things, sharing its vast knowledge. But the knowledge it imparts is poisonous, laced with deceit and malice. How to make weapons that will turn humans against each other, fostering endless conflict. How to manipulate others through dark arts, preying on their weaknesses. How to summon powers that will corrupt your very soul, leaving you a hollow shell. You realize, with growing horror, that even the kind giants aren't trying to help you. They're trying to damn you, to drag you down into their own abyss of depravity. Their very presence corrupts everything they touch, turning survival itself into a form of spiritual poison, slowly eroding your humanity. You wouldn't just be living under giant overlords, forced into servitude. You'd be living in a world poisoned by their insidious influence, where every day of survival comes at the cost of your morality, of your very soul. But perhaps most terrifying of all would be the technology these giants possessed, the power they wielded with such casual indifference. Ancient texts hint at capabilities that sound almost like science fiction, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. The ability to manipulate weather with a thought, to move massive stones through the air as if they were feathers, to create hybrid creatures, grotesque mockeries of nature, and to access knowledge from beyond the physical world, tapping into forces beyond human comprehension. Now, imagine being on the receiving end of such power, the helpless target of their casual experiments. You're hiding in what you think is a safe cave, seeking refuge from the horrors outside, when suddenly the weather outside changes, shifting with unnatural speed. Not gradually, like a natural storm brewing on the horizon, but instantly, as if a switch has been flipped. The sky turns an unnatural shade of black, devoid of stars or moon. Lightning begins striking in precise patterns, illuminating the landscape with an eerie, otherworldly glow. And you realize, with growing horror, that this isn't natural, this isn't random chaos. It's being controlled, manipulated by some unseen force. The Book of Enoch describes the Watchers, teaching humans about the cutting of roots and the power of enchantment, hinting at a deep understanding of the natural world and the ability to manipulate it at will. Other texts speak of giants who could control the elements, who built flying vessels that soared through the skies, and who possessed weapons of unimaginable power capable of leveling mountains. You peer outside your cave, drawn by some morbid curiosity, and see massive stone blocks floating through the air like leaves in the wind, rearranging themselves into new structures at the giant's whim, defying gravity and reason. The very physics of your world are being rewritten by beings whose technology you can't even begin to understand, whose knowledge is beyond your grasp. Archaeological evidence scattered across the globe seems to support some of these outlandish claims, adding weight to the ancient whispers. In Peru, the Sacsayhuaman fortress contains stones so perfectly fitted that they've survived countless earthquakes without the aid of mortar, their joints interlocking with impossible precision. The sheer scale and the precision of the cuts suggest technology far beyond anything ancient humans should have possessed, a level of engineering that remains baffling to this day. Local legends attribute the construction to giants who could make stones walk, imbuing them with life. But imagine witnessing such construction as a tiny human observer, a mere speck in the face of such power. You watch as stones larger than buildings move through the air without any visible means of support, fitting together with impossible precision, defying all logic and reason. You realize, with a growing sense of dread, that in this world the very elements are your enemies, weapons in the hands of beings who see you as nothing more than insects. Similar stories emerge from every continent, echoing across cultures and generations. In Japan, legends speak of Oni, giant demons who could move mountains with a single thought. In Scotland, myths describe the Fomorians, who built stone circles with supernatural power, harnessing forces beyond human understanding. In North America, native tribes tell of a race of cannibalistic giants who possessed great magic, wielding powers that terrified even the bravest warriors. As you cower in whatever meager shelter you can find, these aren't just myths anymore, tales told around a campfire to frighten children. They're your daily reality, the grim truth of your existence. Now imagine being tracked by beings who possess such abilities, beings who can manipulate the very fabric of reality. They don't need to see you to find you, to hunt you down like an animal. They can sense your presence from miles away, like predators sensing the scent of prey on the wind. They don't need to chase you, to expend effort on a futile pursuit. They can simply will the ground beneath your feet to shift, opening chasms that swallow you whole, dropping you into their waiting hands, ending your life in an instant. They don't need weapons to kill you, to spill your blood. They can stop your heart with a thought, snuffing out your life with a casual act of will. The very elements would be turned against you, the building blocks of the universe becoming instruments of your demise. The earth itself would be your enemy, no longer a source of life and sustenance, but a treacherous landscape ready to betray you at any moment. In such a world, survival isn't about cleverness or strength, those human qualities rendered meaningless. It's about the momentary mercy of beings who could end your existence without even noticing they'd done it, a capricious favor granted without reason. And according to the ancient texts, mercy was not something these creatures possessed in abundance. It was a rare and precious commodity, offered only when it suited their twisted purposes. As terrifying as it sounds, some humans did try to resist, did dare to challenge their oppressors. Ancient texts speak of wars between humans and giants, of brave warriors who stood against impossible odds, of heroes who dared to challenge the tyrannical order, risking everything for a chance at freedom. But imagine being asked to join such a rebellion, to stand against such overwhelming power. You're handed a sword, if you can even lift it, its weight designed for hands far larger than yours, and told to march against creatures whose smallest finger is thicker than your entire body. The very notion would be laughable if it weren't so terrifyingly real, a desperate gamble with no chance of success. The Bible mentions several of these giant killers, those who dared to confront the impossible. David against Goliath, a shepherd boy facing a seasoned warrior. Joshua against the Anakim, driving them from their lands. Caleb against the sons of Anak, facing them with unwavering courage. But read these stories carefully, and you'll notice something unsettling, a pattern that hints at a deeper truth. These weren't fair fights, contests of skill and strength. They were miraculous victories against impossible odds, won only through divine intervention by some force beyond human comprehension. The most famous of these encounters is David's battle with Goliath, the ultimate underdog story. But most people miss the crucial details, the underlying reality. Goliath wasn't just tall, a large man. He was a trained warrior from a race of giants, bred for war, armed with weapons that no normal human could even lift. His spearhead alone weighed 15 pounds, a burden that would cripple an ordinary man. Now imagine you're in David's position, but without his divine calling, without the protection of a higher power. You stand before Goliath, and your perspective is that of an ant looking up at a mountain, a being so vast and powerful that you can't even comprehend his scale. David's victory wasn't due to superior skill or strength, to some hidden talent. It was a miracle, a defying of the natural order. But you don't have that divine guidance, that unwavering faith. This is what resistance looked like in the age of giants. A series of miraculous victories, punctuating an otherwise hopeless struggle for survival, fleeting moments of hope in an ocean of despair. And miracles, by definition, were rare, anomalies that defied the norm. According to the ancient texts, this age of giant tyranny couldn't last forever, the darkness eventually consuming itself. The corruption had become so complete, the violence so overwhelming, that divine intervention became necessary, a desperate measure to restore balance. The solution was radical, an apocalyptic cleansing, a complete reset of the world through a global flood, washing away the sins of humanity and the abominations of the giants. But imagine experiencing this salvation from your perspective as a tiny survivor, a vulnerable creature caught in the crossfire of divine judgment. You wake up one morning to the sound of water, Not the gentle patter of rain on your roof, but the roar of oceans falling from the sky, an unrelenting deluge that threatens to engulf everything. Genesis 6:13 states, "So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. As the waters rise around you, consuming everything in their path, you realize that this flood isn't just about cleansing humanity's sin, punishing their transgressions. It's also about exterminating the giants who had made your life a living nightmare, ending their reign of terror. For the first time in your life, you see them afraid, their arrogance stripped away by the unstoppable force of nature. And there's a terrible beauty in watching creatures who once treated you like insects, now thrashing helplessly in the divine deluge, their power rendered meaningless in the face of overwhelming force. But you also realize, with growing dread, that this salvation might kill you too, that you might be collateral damage in this cosmic cleansing, swept away by the same waters that are drowning your oppressors. But here's the most terrifying part, the truth that haunts your dreams. The flood didn't eliminate all of them. Some survived, clinging to existence like a persistent nightmare. Numbers 13:33 chillingly states, "We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Enoch, come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This was written times after times the flood, generations later. The giants had returned, their legacy of terror continuing. So imagine your horror when, generations later, you see those familiar shadows on the horizon again, their silhouettes etched against the sky. The nightmare you thought was over, the terror you believed had been washed away, has returned, more potent and more vengeful than ever before. And this time, they're angry, their power amplified by generations of resentment. What this means is that the age of giants wasn't just a prehistoric nightmare, a fleeting moment in the distant past. It continued throughout human history, a recurring cycle of oppression and resistance. Every time your people began to flourish, to build civilizations and strive for greatness, the giants would return to remind you of your place in the world, to crush your dreams and shatter your hopes. So let's return to our original question. Why wouldn't you survive the age of giants? The answer isn't just about their size or strength, though those would certainly be insurmountable obstacles, challenges that defy human capability. It's about the complete psychological breakdown that living in such constant terror would inevitably cause, the slow erosion of your sanity. Think about how you react when you encounter something genuinely threatening in today's world, a dangerous animal, a violent criminal, a natural disaster. Your heart races, your hands shake, adrenaline floods your system, preparing you for fight or flight. Now, imagine living with that level of terror every moment of every day, never knowing when the next disaster will strike. In a world ruled by giants, you would never sleep soundly, never experience true peace. Every sound in the night could be a footstep, a harbinger of doom. Every shadow could be a massive hand, reaching down to pluck you from your hiding place, ending your existence. Your nervous system, designed to handle occasional bursts of fear, would be constantly flooded with stress hormones, perpetually stuck in fight or flight mode. Within weeks, you'd be suffering from what we now recognize as severe PTSD. But there would be no recovery, no therapy, because the trauma never ends. You'd watch fellow survivors break down one by one, their minds shattered by the relentless pressure. Some would become catatonic, simply sitting in corners and rocking back and forth, lost in their own inner world. Others would succumb to madness, their minds unraveling under the weight of constant fear. But perhaps worse than the constant fear would be the absolute helplessness, the utter lack of control over your own destiny. Humans are problem solvers by nature, hardwired to overcome obstacles, to find solutions to seemingly impossible challenges. But in the age of giants, there are no solutions, only temporary delays of the inevitable, fleeting moments of respite before the inevitable demise. You can't fight beings whose fingernails are harder than your strongest weapons, whose very existence defies the laws of nature. You can't hide from creatures who can reshape the landscape at will, who can sense your presence from miles away. You can't negotiate with beings who see you as nothing more than insects, whose minds are so alien that communication is impossible. Every survival instinct you possess would be not just useless, but counterproductive, leading you down a path to certain death. The fight response? Suicide. The flight response? A brief postponement of death. The freeze response? You become an easy target, a helpless victim. You would be trapped in a world where every natural response to danger only makes your situation worse, a cruel and twisted paradox. The psychological damage from this kind of absolute powerlessness would destroy your mind long before the giants destroyed your body, leaving you a hollow shell, devoid of hope. As your mind gradually fragments under the constant stress, you begin to notice changes in yourself and the other survivors, the physical manifestations of your inner torment. The constant malnutrition has left you weakened and skeletal, your bones jutting out beneath your skin. Your hair has turned grey from stress, even if you're still young, a physical manifestation of the weight you carry. Your hands shake constantly, and you jump at the slightest sound, your senses perpetually on high alert. You've developed what we might call giant paranoia, the inability to enjoy even a moment of peace because you're constantly scanning the horizon for those massive silhouettes. The constant fear of being discovered. You can't look at a distant cloud without wondering if it might be a giant's head, its gaze fixed upon you. The few other survivors you encounter are in similar states, their eyes hollow, their spirits broken. Conversations consist mainly of whispered warnings about giant sightings, sharing rumors and scraps of information, and increasingly desperate plans for finding food or shelter, clutching at straws. No one talks about the future anymore because everyone understands there isn't one, the hope extinguished by the relentless oppression. You've all accepted that you're living on borrowed time, that your continued existence is nothing more than an oversight that will eventually be corrected, a cosmic error waiting to be erased. And perhaps, most terrifyingly of all, part of you begins to hope for that final encounter, to welcome the inevitable end. Death starts to look like mercy, a release from suffering, compared to indefinite survival in this nightmare world, a welcome escape from the relentless torment. So why wouldn't you survive the age of giants? Because survival in such a world requires something no human possesses, the ability to exist indefinitely as prey without losing your sanity, your humanity, or your will to live, a feat beyond mortal capability. Modern humanity has grown comfortable with the illusion of dominance, lulled into a false sense of security. We've forgotten the terror our ancestors knew, the constant awareness that there are things in this world far more powerful than ourselves, forces beyond our control. We've forgotten what it means to truly fear, to be at the mercy of something truly terrifying. But in the age of giants, you would remember the illusion shattered, the truth revealed. Every day would be a lesson in humility, in insignificance, in the true pecking order of creation, a constant reminder of your place in the grand scheme of things. And eventually, inevitably, that lesson would break you, crushing your spirit. Whether you died from starvation, disease, accident, or simply being noticed by one of your giant overlords, your death would be meaningless in the grand scheme of things, a statistic in their reign of terror. You would be forgotten instantly. Your brief existence no more significant to the giants than the death of an ant is to you, a fleeting moment of no consequence. The question isn't whether you would survive the age of giants, a hypothetical scenario. The question is whether that age ever really ended at all, whether the giants are truly gone. And if it hasn't, if they're merely waiting in the shadows, whether you're prepared for what's coming next, for the return of the giants. Because, according to the ancient prophecies, the giants are destined to return to open rule over the earth, to reclaim their dominance. And when they do, modern humans, soft, weak, and completely unprepared for such a reality, will fare even worse than their ancient ancestors, their fate sealed by their ignorance. The ancients tried to warn us, to prepare us for the inevitable. They left their messages carved in stone, written in ancient texts, embedded in the very landscape of our world, hoping we would heed their warnings. They told us about the giants who once ruled the earth, who filled it with violence, who saw humanity as nothing more than insects to be crushed or consumed, a chilling glimpse into a potential future. But we've chosen to see their warnings as myths, their testimonies as legends, their fears as primitive superstitions, dismissing their wisdom as childish fantasies. Perhaps that's exactly what the giants have been waiting for us to do, lulling us into a false sense of security, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Because in the age of giants, ignorance isn't bliss, a shield against the unknown. It's extinction, a path to oblivion. What do you think? Are we living in the shadow of ancient giants, their influence still lingering, or are we heading toward their return, unknowingly walking towards our doom? Let us know in the comments, share your thoughts and theories. Give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, to stay informed and prepared for the unknown. And if you're ready to uncover how the Nephilim may have escaped the flood and still walk among us today, shrouded in secrecy, watch our next video, appearing on your screen right now. Delve deeper into the mystery. Keep your minds open, question everything, seek the truth, and until we meet again, be vigilant.